when we talk about the microbiome, we're really talking about all the bacteria, right, in the
I think
intestine.
bacterium, yeast, I think, the whole
Yeah,
microbiome is
all
is a
those little
swimming
things that are
pool.
living
Yes,
inside her.
yes, that are expressing their DNA. So,
It's amazing that we're like living in conjunction with these living things in our bodies. And, for the most part, we're totally unaware of it, except how it might affect things like our appetite or even our moods, our
mhm.
energy. And, but it's kind of mysterious. And hey, welcome. Welcome back. This is Dr. Gary Pepper, and I'm here today with Mary Gocke, a highly accomplished nutritionist. We're going to be doing something a little different. We're going to be expanding our horizons. And I think Mary's going to be able to bring a whole new dimension to a very important topic, and that is the whole realm of the GLP-1 medications and weight loss and how that can affect your body as well as just being overweight. So, Mary, can you just tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I think you referred to me as being accomplished. I don't know how accomplished I am, but I certainly have had a wonderful career. Uh, I'm a registered
Mhm.
dietitian, and I came into practice during the AIDS crisis. And so we were confronted with the wasting syndrome. And I actually ended up doing a lot of research. And then around year 2000, protease inhibitors came into play, and people started to live with AIDS. And around the same time, there was something called functional medicine coming on the scene. And functional medicine is basically the idea of what is going wrong with the body, and in that realm is we're looking at nutrition. So it was finally that nutrition was front and center in medicine. And so I spent my career working with doctors and providing integrative and functional medicine nutrition. And yeah,
Hmm.
along the way I've had incredible opportunities to work with wonderful clients, wonderful patients. And yeah, I've been very blessed
Hmm.
and lucky, and
So, what are you doing now?
mostly do a lot of gut work, mostly GI. But again, I'm intrigued by weight loss drugs like these GLP-1 that come
Mhm.
on the market. And yeah, and it's fascinating to me, and certainly the nutritional aspect and the benefits of them, and also, the downside of them, and what role can I play in
Sure,
that. And
absolutely.
yeah, so it's a interesting class of drugs, and certainly has piqued
Great.
my interest too.
We were talking a few minutes ago about your thoughts about obesity in general, and I was wondering if you could just, share a few thoughts about how you approach obesity, how you think about it, and if you
Well,
could just fill us in a little bit.
I think of obesity as sort of a metabolic mess, I'll say. And so when we start to accumulate fat cells or adipocytes, it dysregulates us. Not only does insulin
Mhm.
become less sensitive, but now we're in an inflammatory state where these fat cells have actually become an organ. And often you can see that in enlarged bellies on people, and it's become an organ, and it's secreting inflammatory markers. So, and there's stress on the heart. So we've got all sorts of blood pressure issues, blood sugar issues.
Mhm.
So yes, I look at obesity as a metabolic mess, and how am I going to pull it? How am I going to pull it apart? And
Mhm.
how are we going to lose weight?
How are you going to approach it?
Yes.
You had mentioned the microbiome, the
Well,
gut,
I
and
think
how it
that's true, is that
interacts.
obesity certainly dysregulates the microbiome, where now the
Mhm.
bacterium are behaving differently, whether that's a result of obesity and the fat cells, or the diet, or a combination
Mhm.
of the two. We now have this microbiome that isn't as robust as we'd like to see it in the gut, is something called akkermansia. And so we'll often see people who are overweight or carrying more weight have less
Mhm.
akkermansia. And akkermansia is interesting because it influences these L cells in the mucosal lining of the GI tract. It influences the production of glucagon-like peptide, which is GLP-1. So
Right.
we see that this bacterium does influence the production. Um, and now what we're doing is giving GLP-1, and GLP-1 in the gut is spiked in very brief amount. It sort of rises and falls very quickly and influences. It's a hormone, so it influences the body. But one of the things that GLP-1 does is decreases appetite. It also makes insulin more sensitive. So if I have somebody who's carrying excess weight, excess fat cells, I know insulin is less sensitive. They're on the road to diabetes. And here we have these GLP-1s that we can give or that the body will secrete naturally that makes insulin more sensitive and
Okay.
decreases appetite. It does a couple other things.
One of the things I wanted to mention, just for clarification, that when we talk about the microbiome, we're really talking about all the bacteria, right, in the
I think
intestine.
bacterium, yeast. I think the whole
Yeah.
microbiome is
All
a
those little
swimming
things
pool
that are
of
living
yes,
inside her.
yes, that are expressing their DNA. So
It's amazing that we're like living in conjunction with these living things in our bodies. And, for the most part, we're totally unaware of it, except how it might affect things like our appetite or even our moods, our energy. And, but it's kind of mysterious. And I'd have to say, from a medical point of view, it isn't really very focused upon. Certainly in medical school, I
right,
never
right.
heard a thing about it. And only recently am I seeing more and more attention being paid to the microbiome. So you mentioned this akkermansia that it makes GLP-1. So
It doesn't
it's kind
make
of a
GLP-1, but
homemade.
it stimulates the L cells so it's
Oh, I
yeah,
see.
it's not a direct, but it is
I
stimulating
get it.
the L cells to
Okay.
make GLP-1. So
So it's kind of like a homemade Ozempic,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, we make it. But again, we make it in very
Mhm,
brief amount. It peaks and falls very quickly. And now with these injections, we can sustain the amount of
mhm.
GLP-1 in the system systemically. So, right, because we're
Right,
injecting it.
right.
Yes.
Years ago, when these drugs first came to the market,
Mhm,
there was something called Byetta.
mhm,
I don't know if you remember that, but Byetta was really the first. It must be at least 10 years ago, and it was given twice a day.
mhm,
Then that changed to something called Victoza,
mhm,
which was once a day.
mhm,
And then, what do you know? Not too many years go by, and now there's a once a week
mhm,
version,
mhm.
which everybody now is familiar with. I don't think there's many people who are using these other shorter
Right,
acting
right anymore.
medications.
Right. That's right. Yeah, it's got a nice history, and wow, here we are today, and
Right.
it's a very popular drug, and very effective, and effective in lots of ways. But you
Right.
spoke about the microbiome, and yes, I think as a nutritionist, you start to go like, wow, we can influence it, and we can actually influence akkermansia by what we eat. And there's a group of
Mhm,
compounds called polyphenols that are in dark chocolate and green tea and most dark colored berries. We can
mhm,
influence the production of akkermansia with these polyphenols, with some prebiotics. And so
mhm.
it's of interest to me as a nutritionist.
So you can actually talk to the acromantia with nutrients.
Dark chocolate
Yeah.
polyphenol. Yes. Yeah.
So,
A little bit with your green tea.
as yeah.
Hmm.
So in your experience,
Hmm.
how do you approach that kind of thing? I mean, what do you tell your clients? Now, again, this is not medical treatment. This is just educational, just for the listeners. This is not meant to replace advice that you get from your personal healthcare provider. So,
Well, I'm not opposed to the medications. I certainly am not opposed. I think there's going to be a place where they're given in lower doses for a longer period of time, because what we don't know is long-term studies. These drugs have only been around the drugs have been around for a long time, but these injectables, Ozempic,
Right.
Zepbound, Mounjaro, yes, we don't have a lot of long-term studies with these
Right.
with these drugs. So, but I'm not opposed to them, and like I said, maybe there is a place for microdosing, but I do like to
Right.
influence people's diets and suggesting these polyphenols and certainly fibers and prebiotics. And
So what is a prebiotic anyway?
prebiotic is something that is going to have fiber, right? So we think of,
Hmm.
like, not that anybody eats them, but one of the highest prebiotics is something called Jerusalem artichoke. And so,
Jerusalem
yes.
artichoke.
So
Okay.
it's not a very common, but we need fiber. We need to have these fibers that feed the bacterium. And I'm more interested in that than certainly giving
Hmm.
a bunch of probiotics, but the prebiotics feed and the American diet is very low in fiber. We're trying to talk about 35 grams a day, and so I want to be sure that if I'm working with somebody who's on a GLP-1, that they are increasing their fiber and that they're also increasing their protein.
And what kind of things do you like to give, for fiber?
Well, I'll often give a powdered supplement, because a lot of times they don't have a big appetite. One of the side effects of GLP-1s is that it decreases emptying time. And so
Hmm.
I will do powders, often or just flax seeds. Sometimes I think flax seeds are
Flaxseed is good.
yes, are yeah, absolutely ground up flax seeds, like freshly ground, so that you can
Hmm.
grind them
How
and then
about chia
chia
seeds?
seeds are
I
fine
see
too.
those.
Not, I think flax seeds are a little bit better because I like the
Hmm.
omega-3 fatty acids, and which are also beneficial as being anti-inflammatory. Um, but again, I I would I would suggest grinding chia seeds, and people don't recommend that today. People just usually just eat chia seeds, but I like grinding them so that we release these omega-3 fatty acids and the fiber.
So, as we're talking about this, one of the concerns that I have, and I know we've talked about this before, is just the general idea of malnutrition
Yes.
that's associated with rapid
Yes.
weight loss. And certainly a lot of people on the GLP-1 drugs who are successful at losing weight, will tell me, and I imagine they tell you too, how little they eat. And, they're not getting nearly as many calories, which is, really the objective in the case of weight loss, but they're also not getting their essential nutrients. And a topic that I like to focus on is muscle loss associated with the weight loss. And a few studies that I've seen show up to 30% of the weight that you lose with a GLP-1 could be muscle. And we know that we need muscle for survival, not only to play sports, for example. That's not really what I'm driving at, but in everyday activity, getting around, getting up out of a chair, climbing stairs, doing your daily chores. I think losing muscle is a major risk during weight loss. And one of the ideas that keeps being thrown around is that people who are on these medications or who are losing weight, however, that they need to focus on not only fiber, but protein. What's your
Absolutely.
opinion about that?
Yeah, that's a great point. They end up being malnourished. I mean, there's no doubt
Right.
about it that are not taking in enough calories and therefore mobilizing muscle mass for bodily functions to survive. So yes,
Right.
absolutely protein, absolutely. Sometimes I'll do a liquid multivitamin and some liquid minerals at dinner. I mean, at bedtime, um, just so that I can. Because again, what people don't realize is if you take a pill, right, and you're on GLP-1, even aspirin, it's going to sit in your stomach for a long time. It's not moving through. So
Right.
oftentimes, yeah.
Right.
And I have seen people develop ulcerations from taking Advils and so forth because the stomach emptying is slowed. So I will use some liquid multivitamins and minerals at bedtime because there's a big risk for fatigue and certainly the loss of muscle mass. But I have
Right.
had somebody came to me and they had lost over 100 pounds, and I sent them to PT because they had lost the ability of movement. And imagine losing 100 pounds on your frame, and how then do we proceed? How do we move? And he had to really learn to
Right.
build muscle mass. And of course, he hadn't changed his diet at all. So
Hmm.
yeah, there's physicians out there prescribing the medication. Great, they see the weight loss. They might see the insulin become more sensitive, and the blood sugars get better, and maybe hypertension comes down, and all sorts of benefits. But do we want somebody who's
Right.
malnourished
Sure.
who no longer knows how to ambulate?
Right. And another thing about the muscle loss, though, is that not only is nutrition and protein important, but um, resistance training using
Absolutely.
the muscles.
Yes.
If you give the muscles enough protein and then you challenge them with a little bit of exertion, and again, resistance bands, I think, are very
Mhm.
popular and easy. And that seems to, that combination really has a big benefit on muscle mass. So, but these things are overlooked, and
Mhm.
they're not as easy as taking that one injection a week. And we really don't know the long-term outcome.
Mhm.
As you mentioned, the GLP-1 drugs, and we talked about it at the beginning about how it started off with Byetta and
Mhm.
Victoza. These were for the diabetes
They're not new.
treatments.
They're not new,
So
but
we had
yes.
we had
Mhm.
a fairly extensive lead-in period, but as far as treating obesity with these medications, that's only a few years.
Mhm.
I remember when the drugs first came out for diabetes, some of the practitioners recognized the weight loss effect, and I'm not going to tell any tales, but I can say that that's where people start to go, aha,
Yeah.
here's something that causes weight loss. So
Well,
it
and you can
became,
see the
a
public.
phenomenon.
Yeah, the public has jumped on it. We have all these companies now providing
Right.
semi-glutides. So I think I think the idea of changing exercise routine or diet is not in the forefront because they think, oh, I'll just take the meds and lose the weight.
Right.
But there are downsides. But like I said, I hope one day there's a place for like microdosing these because GLP-1,
Yeah.
it's an incredible hormone. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it has a lot of benefits.
Well, that brings up that concept of what do you do when you want to stop taking them? You mentioned microdosing. And it's interesting to me that there's so much controversy, at least in the medical literature, about microdosing. Let's face it, if one aspirin is a standard dose and you take a half, I mean, what the heck? I mean, I can't see taking less of a medication that has been approved for something as being a problem. But yet again, the wheels of progress turn slowly. I'm a little suspicious about, in this case, why, but I just would mention that even though it seems to make a lot of sense, microdosing is still considered a bit controversial.
Mhm.
Um,
Or at least a tapering off
so,
or weaning off of these drugs
right,
because I think it's irresponsible to tell somebody to stop. You've reached your goal and that's it. And if they haven't made the
right.
changes, then
Well, we know that a large percentage of people regain the weight once they stop.
Mhm.
So that is a whole other topic, how to prevent regain of weight once you decide, well, I'd like to take a break, or for whatever reason, I can't tolerate this.
Mhm.
That's why I like this akkermansia story, because, this is something that's going on inside our own bodies. But, it's not a traditional approach. And I guess a lot more research is necessary to figure out how to harness things like that. I mean, you can't eat dark chocolate all day long to keep that thing going. But the thought has crossed my mind.
But it just, in essence, what we're saying is a colorful diet, right? A varied diet. So I'm not eating the same foods every day, and a diet that's rich in fiber and protein.
So is there any like standard you can say to the general public about what you would consider a well-rounded diet
Well,
in terms of
I think I
how
just
much
said it.
fiber, how much protein?
Yes. I mean, look,
Hard and fast.
I think you can underestimate protein needs
Mhm.
in somebody on a GLP-1. And I think, it's all in my world individualized. There are some
Sure,
basics that I think
absolutely.
we should all follow. But
Mhm.
when I have somebody on a GLP-1, I certainly will go to a higher level of protein than might be calculated
Right,
based on height and weight and activity level. They might
right.
needs might be higher. Yes.
Right. So we know that people who are losing weight need a higher amount of protein than somebody who is sort of on a stable weight situation.
Yeah.
So the actual losing of weight requires a higher amount of protein.
Yes, and healing and repair. If
Yeah.
somebody is certainly uh, in post-op, or the proteins.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, So again, individualized. I have some basic ideas of what I like people to follow. Like I said, variety.
Hmm.
Variety is key. Like, we cannot eat the same foods
Right.
all the time. The body does not like that. We need a variety of nutrients. That we think about color, and we think about good sources of protein, low toxic burden,
Hmm.
pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, keeping those down, keeping
Right.
plastics out of the body, and then then the fiber rich foods.
Yeah.
And we can do resistant
Yeah.
starches. I
This would
like
be a whole.
resistant starches. I like rice and potatoes that are building that resistant starch, meaning they go through digestion without being absorbed, and so they'll hit the large bowel where the bacterium
Mhm.
reside, and they'll feed that bacterium. We think of it as resistant starch.
Oh, that's very
Hmm.
interesting.
Hmm.
I know so many people are afraid of rice and potato
Hmm.
because they're carbs,
Hmm. Hmm.
but here there's a high fiber content, I guess, what you're
Yes,
saying.
yeah, resistance.
So
Yes.
they're not the enemy.
No, they're not the enemy. No.
Yeah. So I would mention one thing, because of the interest in how much protein people might target in their diets while they're losing weight or for whatever reason, there's a website that we have that's called Semaglu Diet, SEMAGLUDIET.com. And we have a free protein calculator that takes into account activity, age, height, and weight, whether you have a special dietary interest like vegan or low fat. And you can put all that information and get a estimate, a number that is in the general recommendation range for all those factors. Again, these are just for informational purposes, but I know a lot of people are sort of in the dark. Am I supposed to get 75 grams? Am I supposed to get 100 grams? So it's a interesting ballpark kind of thing that you can do.
Mhm.
So I would also want to end here with one comment about something. As well as losing muscle during weight loss, people could be losing bone mass. And I did a literature search, and I found some contradictory information in saying that the GLP-1 drugs actually can improve bone density, but I was skeptical of that. But the one article that was what I consider most comprehensive actually showed bone loss after 1 year on medication. So that would be a topic we could,
Mhm.
if we can come back to at some
Absolutely.
point. But osteoporosis is a big problem for postmenopausal women. Breaking bones is a extremely hazardous outcome and has very bad prognosis in some cases. And I don't think it's getting nearly the attention that it needs. And the problem being that, good studies will take several years. It's not as easy as watching the scale go down pound by pound, because bone density changes slowly. But we can talk more about that, what you might want to recommend or consider doing. So this was very illuminating to me, and there are basic things that are not being taught, and this is the kind of information I think that needs to get out there. So do you have any other questions or comments before we...
I don't think so. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
I hope we can get you to come back and
Yes,
share. So
absolutely.
thanks again for watching Dr. Pepper Really. And don't forget to come back here in the near future. We should have more illuminating topics for you. So stay well. Thank you.